Marketers know that growing a brand isn't something that happens overnight. According to a new study, only 6% of brands gain noticeable market share in a one-year period. This week's episode looks at what goes into the right mix of exposure, activation, and experience to grow your brand more quickly. Plus, special guest Alexander Lewis shares his ideas for how to create more exposure for your brand overnight. Stay tuned for all that and more. Welcome to Marketing is Broken, the weekly series where we know that a brand is built one content brick at a time.
Yes! Look what I have created! I have made fire! I have made fire!
As marketers, we're constantly being pressured to drive company growth. Sales wants more leads to drive revenue to help hit numbers for leadership. Leadership wants revenue to make investors happy, and investors want revenue so they can get some of that sweet, sweet ROI. And yet, a new study by Kantar points to growing your brand if you want to grow sales. Consider this. Number one, consumers are willing to pay 14% more for brands that they perceive to be meaningfully different. Number two, the percentage of sales tied to brand depends on the brand's clarity. Brands with high brand clarity were responsible for 17% of sales, where low brand clarity only drove about 10% of sales. And number three, it's a lot easier for small brands to grow than it is for larger brands unless the category itself is growing. Having the right mix of exposure, activation, and experience, despite sounding logical, is rare according to the study. Just 4% of the brands Kantar looked at overachieved in each area, but they did end up being the brands that grew the fastest too. We wanted to know how exposure, activation, and experience can help brands grow. So we reached out to Alexander Lewis, a copywriter and marketing consultant at Lewis Commercial Writing, to ask him a few questions about how marketers should think about brand growth. How much do you think brands should spend on exposure versus activation versus retention?
I think that the key to content distribution is trying to make sure that when people come to your website, they continue to come back after they've been there the first time. So most companies that work on sending out content and creating new content, they don't think about the fact that the chance of getting that person back to your site again, or the chance of them making a purchase on that very first visit, is very, very unlikely. And so focusing on retention, so in the case of a YouTube video, having a subscribe button and really emphasizing that, or in the case of most people's websites, having a nudge or kind of like a lead magnet that drives people to subscribe to your newsletter, that allows people to continue to see your content, and it kind of helps you build a following over time that compounds the amount of time that people are seeing you and your brand.
That's great. All right, so exposure is a big part of growing brands. What are some of the best ways to get free exposure in 2019?
Yeah, a lot of companies, when they create a blog post, they typically go through the same simple process. They do some research, write an article, focus really heavily on creating high quality content, which is good because we know Google likes that, we know people like that. But then when they click publish, they just kind of think, okay, I've created it well, I've put a lot of effort into it, so the systems are going to help me, and just kind of push it out to who needs to see it. So they just click publish, share it once and twice on Facebook and LinkedIn, and then move on to the next one. But if you're trying to get exposure, you have to realize that those systems are becoming more and more, infiltrated by so many people who think the same way. And so when you share a link, there's thousands of other people sharing a similar link, or possibly depending on your field. And so trying to find out, okay, I have to go much closer to where my customers actually are. So not just Facebook, but Facebook groups. And when you get to a Facebook group, maybe not just sharing a link, but also sharing a repurposed version of the article so that it's really easy for someone to skim, really easy for them to find the information they're looking for. And also thinking of outlets that are outside of the norm. So everyone is posting on Facebook and LinkedIn. And so if you have places that you think are a little less crowded, that maybe it's like a really niche subreddit where the people on that they're very focused on that topic. They read every article that gets published there, every idea, but almost no one is posting in there, or it's only like a few hundred people, as opposed to like, okay, but on Facebook, 2 million people are on there, or 2 billion people are on there. And so a lot of times people will like look at those larger numbers and not think about the quality of the people who are looking at those smaller places.
And there's a
So
lot out there, huh? Just like your subreddits and maybe your Quoras and other kind of community focused kind of sites out there.
yeah, and there's even places you can find curated blogs as well, or curated newsletters. So there's a place like zest.is where people will share a link and it'll go through a personal curation. Like someone will be there saying, okay, is this right for our readers? And if it's a high quality article that's topical and that they think their readers will enjoy, then they'll push it through. But most of the content gets stopped in that gatekeeper. But if your content goes through, it's a very organized group of people who are trusting that entity to share only the best content. And so you can find curated newsletters like that. And if you've written a really high quality post, then you might be able to get it featured in that and drive a bunch of high quality leads to your website.
That's great. Okay, so those were some of the free ways, but now let's talk about paid. What are some of the best ways to get quality paid exposure in 2019?
Yeah, well, a lot of the lowest cost is still social media. So you can still relatively get really low cost exposure on Twitter, even LinkedIn, like, is a little higher than some of the other places. But if you're doing it right and you know the right keywords to go for and stuff like that, that can still be relatively cheap compared to other platforms. And then a lot of people don't know that Quora has advertising, and so you can go on there and you can be a little bit more creative with those ads. So you can think about, okay, like if there are all these limits on all these other platforms, like Quora is there as somewhat of an entertainment site. So you can ask really quirky questions that are still topical to the people who are interested in them. And it might drive a lot of traffic. And it, I believe, is also tends to be a lot cheaper than like Google Ads and other things, because it's a little bit lesser known. So there's less people competing for the same keywords.
That's fantastic. Alexander Lewis, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
How much of your time and money is spent on exposure, activation, and experience or retention? Is it equal across all three areas, or does your company tend to focus on one or two more than the other? What are the pros and cons that come with it? Share your thoughts in the comments, and you might just win yourself some Brandish Insights gear. We'll see you next time. Hey, it's Josh from Brandish Insights. Thank you for watching Marketing is Broken. If you like this week's episode, please click below to subscribe or check out other episodes. And if your company could use more insights around your branding efforts, check out brandishinsights.com. Marketing is broken, now in 4K.